10. Transair Flight 810. Shortly after taking off, the pilot of Transair Flight 810 reported mechanical trouble, with the complete loss of one engine and the second quickly starting to overheat. The crew knew they were in trouble. After contacting flight control and trying to return to the runway, the pilot realized they had to put the aircraft into the water. Only 11 minutes after takeoff, Transair 810 went into the water 3 miles south of the Hawaiian island of Oahu. The plane came to rest on a shelf between 350 and 450 feet underwater after the crew evacuated. In a joint effort between the NTSB, local authorities, and private contractors, an effort to recover the aircraft was launched. Over several months, both pieces of the fuselage were found, along with 2 JT-8D engines. All 8 cargo containers and the flight's onboard recorders were salvaged from the wreck. Recovering nearly the entire aircraft and the onboard recording devices is a massive step in helping the NTSB find out what exactly went wrong. 9. The rescue of Harrison Okene. In May 2013, Harrison Okene was a cook on a tugboat that sank in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Nigeria. He was one of 12 crew members, but he was the only survivor. Somehow, he managed to stay alive for 60 hours in a tiny air pocket inside the overturned vessel, about 30 meters underwater. Okene's troubles began when he woke up to use the bathroom and heard a loud noise. He realized water was rushing into the boat, so he scrambled to find an exit. The cook made his way to a cabin with a small pocket of air and waited for help. He had no water or food, only a bottle of soda. He also had no light except for his phone, which quickly died. He prayed and recited prayers as he heard sharks and fish eating his dead colleagues. Okene also heard rescue divers knocking on the hull, but they couldn't hear him. He was losing hope when he finally saw a light. It was a diver who expected to recover bodies, not any survivors. The diver was shocked to see Okene's hand reaching out. He quickly gave him an oxygen mask and a helmet while communicating with his team on the surface. They created a plan to bring Okene safely up, avoiding decompression sickness that could be fatal after spending such a long time underwater. When Okene was brought up to the surface, he was taken to a decompression chamber for 60 hours. Then he was reunited with his family and friends, who were overjoyed to see him alive. His story made headlines around the world as he beat the odds and lived. 8. The MV Tricolor. The Norwegian vehicle carrier MV Tricolor sank in the English Channel back in 2002 after colliding with another ship. It was carrying about 3,000 luxury cars worth roughly $50 million. The wreck posed a hazard to naval navigation and a threat to the overall environment, so a salvage operation was quickly launched to remove it. The team decided to cut the ship into 9 pieces using a wire saw before lifting them onto barges. The operation was complex, as it involved working in deep water with strong currents and bad weather. The cutting took 6 or so months, from April to October 2003. Lifting the pieces was delayed by several factors, including legal disputes, technical problems, and more. The last piece was finally recovered in July 2004, almost 2 years after the sinking. It was transported to Belgium for recycling. The salvage of the MV Tricolor cost about $40 million and was one of the most challenging maritime salvage operations ever undertaken. 7. Project Desorion. Project Desorion was a secret CIA operation with the purpose of recovering a sunken Soviet submarine, K-129, from the Pacific Ocean in 1974. The CIA used the Hughes Glomar Explorer, which was disguised as a deep-sea mining ship. The vessel had a giant claw that could lift objects from depths of 3 miles. The recovery was very risky, as the CIA had to avoid detection by Soviets and deal with technical difficulties. The submarine was also damaged by an explosion, causing it to sink in 1968. The agency managed to retrieve only part of the submarine. Some sources say they recovered 2 nuclear-tipped torpedoes, codebooks, and 6 bodies of Soviet sailors. The operation was kept secret for years until details were leaked to the press in 1975. The CIA tried to limit information about Project Desorion, using the phrase neither confirm nor deny, which became well known as the Glomar response. Project Desorion remains one of the most daring and impressive feats of espionage and engineering in modern history. 6. The Costa Concordia. The The Costa Concordia was an Italian cruise ship that capsized on January 13, 2012, after running into the rocks in Italy's Tyrrhenian Sea. In total, 4,200 people were aboard the ship. The collision made a huge gash in the hull and flooded multiple compartments. The ship tilted to one side and eventually flipped. The rescue operation involved helicopters, boats, divers, and locals who helped evacuate survivors. It took over 6 hours to rescue most of the people on board, but some remained trapped inside for a day. The disaster killed 32 people and injured hundreds more. The salvage operation was one of the most expensive in maritime history. It involved stabilizing the ship, removing fuel and debris, refloating it, and towing it away. The process took more than 2 years and cost over $2 billion. The shipwreck had a lasting impact on the island of Giglio and its residents. The island soon became a tourist attraction for curious visitors who wanted to see the wreck site for themselves. Some locals benefited from the business, while others resented the intrusion and disruption. Do you think you could have survived if your cruise ship sank? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed the video so far. 5. Recovery of the USS Oklahoma. On August 13, 1941, the USS Oklahoma was moored alongside the USS Maryland BB-46 when Japanese aircraft launched a deadly attack. Its port side was torn open by Type 91 aerial torpedoes, causing it to roll onto its side with over 400 men trapped below deck. From the start of the assault, sailors and civilian Navy Yard employees launched a rescue effort. They cut away torn hull fittings, patched holes, and cleared debris away. Eventually, Oklahoma was brought back to the surface and was ready for repair. This process took months, and many crew members died during the effort to revive the ship. On Monday, the last 33 members of Oklahoma's crew were reinterred at Pearl Harbor, and their names were recorded on the cords of the missing at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. This is just one more step toward fulfilling a promise made to servicemen in World War II that their country would do everything in its power to get them home safely. 4. The recovery of Apollo 13. Apollo 13 was a lunar mission that faced a series of problems, preventing it from landing on the moon. The lives of 3 crew members were endangered: Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes. On April 13, 1970, an oxygen tank exploded in the service module, causing a loss of power, heat, and oxygen. The crew had to use the module as a survival lifeboat and return to Earth. NASA personnel on the ground worked tirelessly to create solutions for challenges such as conserving power, fixing carbon dioxide levels, navigating, and making a safe re-entry. The crew also had to endure freezing temperatures, sleep deprivation, and unbelievable stress. On April 17, 1970, after 4 days, Apollo 13 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. The crew was welcomed aboard the recovery ship USS Iwo Jima by Rear Admiral Donald C. Davis. A life-size sculpture capturing this moment was installed at the Houston Space Center in 2021. Apollo 13 was dubbed a successful failure because it demonstrated NASA's ability to overcome a treacherous crisis and bring the crew home safely. 3. The recovery of the Kursk. On August 12, 2000, the Kursk nuclear submarine plunged into the Barents Sea and submerged beneath water, leaving 118 crew members dead and 23 survivors trapped with little hope. On a routine exercise with Russia's aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov and battlecruiser Pyotr Veliky, the Kursk suffered 2 devastating explosions. Western and Russian officials are divided over what caused this accident. Russian military leaders say the submarine was hit by a spy submarine, though Western nations deny this claim. The Kursk sank within minutes after the blast, but 23 sailors survived and took shelter at the back of the vessel. Russia sent a rescue mini-sub to help, but its batteries were too low to sustain the operation for long. The Soviet government kept quiet about the incident and only accepted international help days after the sinking. After months, the rescue of the 118 crew members was completed. The Russian government now has to decide whether or not to raise the doomed submarine. This project has divided Russian military observers and will require significant financial investment. On top of that, bad weather could potentially interfere with operations. Ultimately, it will be towed to a dry dock near Roslyakovo for storage. 2. The recovery of the Ever Given. The Ever Given was a massive cargo ship that blocked the Suez Canal for about 6 days back in March 2021. The canal is a vital route for trade, connecting Europe and Asia. The blockage caused a backlog of ships and disrupted international supply chains. The accident happened on March 23, 2021, when strong winds and poor visibility forced the Ever Given to veer off course and run aground on the banks of the canal. The ship was 1,312 feet long and weighed roughly 200,000 tons, making it one of the largest vessels still in operation. It was carrying 18,300 containers of goods. A complex salvage operation was formed to free the ship, involving tugboats, dredgers, excavators, and more. They had to remove large areas of sand and mud from around the ship's bow and stern, while also using high tides to lift it up. On March 29th, after 6 days of intense efforts, the Ever Given was finally refloated and towed to a nearby lake for inspection. The accident's cause is still under investigation. Some factors that may have been to blame include human error, technical failure, weather conditions, and canal design. The Suez Canal Authority (SCA) sought compensation from the ship's owner for the cost of the salvage, damage to the canal's banks, and more. The ship remained impounded until July 7, 2021, when a settlement deal was reached between both parties. This incident highlighted the vulnerability of global supply chains and raised questions about both maritime safety and efficiency. 1. Recovery of the Deep Horizon oil well. Recovery from the Deep Horizon oil well is a difficult and expensive endeavor. It's required billions of dollars in cleanup costs, with many impacts yet to come. In April 2010, a well blew out in Texas, killing 11 people and spilling 134 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, one of the largest oil spills in history. It had devastating effects on communities along the East Coast, from Texas to Florida. Days after the explosion, British petroleum and environmental first responders worked to contain the spill by spraying dispersants that help break down oil, setting surface oil afire, and using floating booms and underwater chambers, which helped stop the leak from spreading further. But over time, the oil slick grew larger, coating 1,300 miles of shoreline, leaving thousands of people unemployed in the fishing, tourism, and energy industries. It was so severe that it threatened marine life like shrimp, lobster, and other shellfish by polluting their habitats. Scientists are still investigating the impacts of oil on these areas and other natural resources in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Scientists are currently evaluating potential solutions to understand what type of environmental restoration and conservation measures will be necessary to fully restore ecosystems and their services. It will take time for these damaged resources to recover, but with the correct environmental restoration, it's possible. Researchers are working closely with other agencies to identify which types of restoration are necessary in different affected regions and are assessing their costs and effectiveness. They'll then determine how much funding is needed and ensure it's allocated wisely and efficiently. Thanks for watching. Which of these recovery operations did you find the most interesting? Let us know in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest uploads. We'll see you next time.